How much is your time really worth? We all have the same 24 hours a day. It's how you manage those hours that counts. If you're constantly battling the clock, you are going to love this conversation. Kathy Decocq is back, and we've put together a simple series to get to the root on how you can sustainably shift the way you spend your precious time. Together, we bring a holistic approach, touching on the mindset, strategy, and action components that are so vital to true change. This is number 2 of 4 conversations, so if you didn't hear the first, you might go back, where we will explore the real barriers to maximizing your time and what you can do differently to finally make traction on the things that matter most. Today, Kathy and I dig into how our identity and need for validation can drive the way we spend our time and take us way out of balance, and what you can begin to do now to change the course. It's not too late. P.S. During next week's episode, we had an inspired idea, and it involves you. We can't wait to share it with you. Be sure to tune in next week for a special announcement, an exciting invitation. Here we go. I'm Carla Reeves, and this is Differently, a podcast where we explore the ins and outs of what becomes possible when we're willing to think, do, and show up differently to the moments of our everyday lives. Hey everyone, Kathy Decocq and I are back to talk about time and the importance of it. And last time we landed on this idea of identity and how important it is when it comes to managing our time and our productivity, because often our identity and this need for identity and this attachment to kind of getting that next external validation fix, if you will, can often really be wreaking havoc on the way you manage your time and your day and everything. So, hey, Kathy, I'm excited to be back.
Hey.
Yeah,
I am so excited to be here.
You started to talk last time about the identity sort of crisis that you had, and I'll share mine too. But why don't you kind of take us back there? What exactly happened, and how did you kind of break that cycle that was running your life at the time?
Absolutely, yeah. And so, if I think about it. It's been several years now that this happened, but I was wearing kind of the fact that I was working long hours, several days a week, weekends, nights, whatever, like I was wearing that as a bit of a badge of honor to say, like, I don't know, almost like it wasn't so much woe is me, but like, look at, this superhero that's burning the candle at both ends and still getting all this stuff done and, whatever. And, trying to be that superhero at work. And, I didn't realize it at the time. Of course, looking back on it, it's very obvious. But, at the time, it was like people would say things to me like, we were in a virtual environment. So they're like, oh, you're always online. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm always working, or you sent me an email at, 10:30 last night. Like, what the heck? Like, well, it had to get done, Bob, or, whatever. So, people would say things to me and my reaction was defensive. It was like, yeah, but the stuff has to get done. Nobody else is going to do it, And so those, that's kind of where I could see that I was trying, to rationalize it in my own brain, like why I was doing what I was doing, and trying to look, very dedicated, very
honoring the badge.
Like, yeah, that's my badge. Check it out, and what turned out was it was only me that cared about the badge. No one else in that environment, it didn't matter to them whether I got the email sent that night or the next morning or 2 days from then. I was putting all of that pressure on myself to I don't know, appear hardworking. Part of it's a virtual environment problem. Part of it is, I had a new boss at the time. There was a big global launch that was happening. Like there was a lot of things that kind of fed the perfect storm. But what ended up happening was I just worked myself into illness. And, my boss was telling me like, hey, you've got to take a day off. And my reaction was like, well, then it's all, going to fall apart. If I take a day off, can't do it. And, eventually my body said, nope, we're going to take 3 months off. And so it was like, well, now all of those, that badge got put in the drawer because there was nobody to tell it to anymore. And I just had to focus on, getting myself back to a level of health where I could even work again. So it got pretty crazy. And, looking back on it, like I put all that pressure on myself. And it wasn't like nobody was expecting it of me. It was just me doing it.
Question for you. I always like to ask my clients this, but I'm going to ask you is there a reason it made perfect sense that you did life that way for that period of time? Like given your upbringing, yeah, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, I mean, it was super. So my upbringing, my work ethic is all, very very hardworking, very want to be valued and recognized by, for my contributions to whatever it is that I'm doing. And so in my mind, I was, kind of pulling that martyr card and, justifying, rationalizing, however you want to think about it, that, this is just what had to get done.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes such perfect sense because often it is driven by something in our past. I mean, for me too, that's how I learned, working really hard, being really loyal, being really dependable, getting stuff done were all things that I learned at a very young age too, that got me accolades, got me acceptance and approval. And those things I wanted. And it became almost like, the next fix, almost like a drug addict, like I needed that next accolade or external validation. And even as a grown adult, that was still running my life, and until I actually was working with a coach and he asked me to track my time. And at the time I was saying, I want to create, I'm out to create this extraordinary marriage. And he's like, yeah, why don't you track your time for a week? And I came back with my tail between my legs because I am a woman of integrity and I was totally out of integrity and did not know it. It was like a blind spot because my husband was getting the leftovers at best of my time. And so a lot of times we're out of alignment with what we say we want, but what we're actually doing. And Kathy, your story is so powerful because your body was telling you. And I think as we move into later about talking about takeaways from this and giving people takeaways, one is to listen to your body because our bodies will tell us when we're extending well beyond what, what is healthy and well for us.
Well, yeah, and mine was my last line of defense. Mine, because, and I'm sure everybody listening has experienced this at one time or another. You get into a rhythm, you get into a habit of working from sun up to sundown. So then your body kind of adjusts to that, but it can only sustain it for so long. And that's what I'm hoping, by sharing my story, I'm hoping that folks listening pay attention earlier than I did, which is when my body was like, we are finished. Because I mean, that's your last line of defense. If your body goes like everything, you have to stop. Or then it becomes very grave, which is, like, guys, it's just work. Like it's
just work.
It's not worth it.
And no, I loved what you said about no one cares. No one cared about we put so much pressure on ourselves.
I mean, they cared about me as a person, they're like, oh my gosh, like this is not sustainable. Like they would tell me that stuff, but I'm like, yeah, whatever. They, I had just put all that pressure on myself for no reason.
Yeah. And that's what our need for identity, can really do. And I think that looking at my pattern, it was like I would go, 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 crash. And then it would take me out for a few days, that cycle, go, 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 and then crash because I wasn't taking care of myself along the way. And I know that's what you teach your clients when you're working with them. And it's what I teach my clients too, is like, let's learn to cultivate our well-being along the way. And I think one of the first steps is stepping away from, is your identity and need for identity and validation sort of running the show here? And I think you talked about awareness being really the first key to that, right?
Yeah, for me, it's always awareness, and it sounds a bit cliche, but like unless you're paying attention, unless you're tuned in and you know what's happening or what the cause and effect is, like you don't have any impetus for change. You'll just be blind to it. Like you had mentioned earlier, just having a blind spot because nobody had said, "Hey, write it down." And you're like, "Oh, geez." Like when you look at it, like then it becomes so obvious. Now you're aware, and that's really the first step to being able to make meaningful and long-standing change. Is that you just have to know it's happening. And then I like to coach my clients to look for their tells, look for their, I call them like little pink flags. So before you get a red flag, you just want like a tiny little pink flag to pay attention to so that then something less than ideal is about to happen and you can interrupt it a little bit sooner than it gets all the way to red flag status. I don't know. How about you? Like when you are working with your clients, like how do you help them with this?
Yeah, identity is, an interesting topic because what I have seen over the years is that a lot of times people are living to avoid, people are living to not fail, people are living to look good, have everything look good. And I certainly fell into this too. And so the first part of our work together is to kind of unpack that, to say, that may have been required at one time in your life. It may have made really good sense that you behaved that way and you learned to kind of survive your environment and feel worthy and as a human. But now we're grown adults and we have the opportunity to really look at the patterns and the things that are running us to say, hey, is this working? And along with awareness, I think it's like, wait a minute, is this working? I was just writing something earlier today about, are the check boxes leading to the life we want to have? Is the next achievement, is it getting us where we really want to go and really want to feel? And I think awareness along with what do you really want? And is all of this busyness and doing leading you in that direction? And I think the answer to both of those questions or the inquiry into both of those things is going to give you some really good information to say, hey, I'm ready to make a change. And just for me, like, a lot of times in my life, it was like, I knew something wasn't working or wasn't right. And just saying, you know what, I know there's a different way. I want to do something different here. I know something better is possible was really the first step of the how appearing. I didn't know how that was going to happen, but I knew I wanted to make it happen. And I
Yeah.
think that's a great step too. Any final
Well,
thoughts?
yeah. I mean, it's like, and I have a silly example for this, but it came up, just in this past week where and I'm sure folks listening to, like, there's some element of like, just toe the line and just keep on going, like, and not paying attention to whether something's working for you or not, or leading you to a desired outcome. So silly example, but I think it illustrates the point. I got a new tablet because I need to have some, mobility with my role. And I turned that thing on, and within 2 minutes, I'm like, oh, this interface, I can't handle it. And I was like, all right, I'll just learn how to do it. And then, like 10 minutes later, I'm like,
Muscle
oh,
our way
forget
through it,
this.
right? Suffer
Yeah,
through
heck
it.
no, I'm returning it and I'm getting something else. I was like, so, me 5 years ago would still have that tablet and still would be agonizing through learning a new operating system. When here last week, I'm like, oh, forget it. I'll just get something else. and I just took it back. So like, it's a silly example, but I think it illustrates what you're saying. Like the awareness to just say, I don't like this. And then the next step, I think, which is probably the harder step, but that's what we're working here to do, is to help people kind of work through this, is, give yourself permission to just be okay with not liking it. Like, it's fine.
I love that, Kathy. And I think that's going to be a future session, is just giving ourselves permission to kind of work within our own likes and our own rhythms and not have it look like what somebody else is doing. But it's tying it back to just saying, you know what, this isn't working. And let me, being aware that something isn't working and that you're ready to change, take that into your day today and just do an inquiry and see where you lie inside of that.
Yeah. And I like that. And I think finding small opportunities for that, like, are you going to build Rome in a day? Are you going to change your life in a day? Probably not. But, like if you wanted orange juice and they brought you apple juice, like, just ask them for the orange juice, like a small thing like that can help snowball that thinking and bring it to, a more meaningful space than just what breakfast drink you're having. But like, start small is what I like to do.
It's a great suggestion. I love starting small. I think small shifts lead to the big changes that we desire. And the choices that we're making in the little tiny moments of our life are the ones that ripple to the larger shift we want to create. So awesome.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being here, Kathy.
You bet. It's been fun, Carla.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Differently. I hope it stirred your thinking, and I invite you to take one inspired action. If you want to get back in the driver's seat of your time, your inspired action this week might be to sign up for Time Camp. Camp starts soon. There are limited spots available. We've put a link in the show notes where you can find all the details. We're packing our bags and getting all of our gear ready for you, and we can't wait to see you at Time Camp.